Behind the lavish parades of the empire and the brilliance of Napoleonic victories lay an invisible war, a confrontation between the most powerful man in Europe and the secret societies that wove their web across the continent. Napoleon Bonaparte, who conquered half of Europe, felt a strange unease before the people who gathered in the silence of Masonic lodges. What made the emperor, commanding hundreds of thousands of soldiers, fear these secret brotherhoods? Napoleon's relationship with Freemasonry followed a complex path from initial rapprochement to open confrontation. In the early years of his career, the young general saw Masonic lodges as a useful tool for consolidating power and spreading his influence. Masonic ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity seemed consonant with the revolutionary principles of New France. However, over time, this connection turned into deep distrust. The emperor began to view secret societies as a potential threat to his absolute control, as a hotbed of conspiracies and opposition. Behind the scenes of the great empire, a real secret war unfolded, with spies, surveillance, arrests, and political intrigues. The young Napoleon Bonaparte was born in Corsica in 1769, when the island had just come under French rule. His path to the pinnacles of power began in the military schools of Brienne and Paris, where not only his military skills, but also his social connections were forged. It was during these years that the young Corsican might have first encountered Masonic ideas, so popular among the French elite of that time. In late 18th century France, Masonic lodges became centers of intellectual and political life. They united progressive nobles, the bourgeoisie, and military men who discussed Enlightenment ideas away from the eyes of royal censors. For an ambitious officer without noble birth or connections, as Bonaparte was, Freemasonry could have been a stepping stone to recognition in society. Napoleon's first documented contacts with Masons date back to the period of the Italian campaign of 1796 to 1797. The young general, achieving brilliant victories, attracted the attention of Italian Masonic lodges, which saw in him the embodiment of revolutionary ideals. Historical sources indicate that during this period, Bonaparte maintained friendly relations with prominent Masons, including his generals Massena and Berthier. The Egyptian period of Napoleon's career is particularly interesting. During the expedition of 1798, he found himself in a country where Freemasonry was closely intertwined with an interest in ancient mysteries. Many officers of his army were Masons and established field lodges directly during the campaign. There is evidence that Napoleon attended meetings of the Isis Lodge in Cairo, where military men and scholars from his expedition studied ancient Egyptian symbols, many of which later entered Masonic symbolism. Was Napoleon himself a Mason? This question still causes debate among historians. No direct evidence of his formal initiation has been found. However, many contemporaries considered him a brother. Some Masonic historians claim that Bonaparte was initiated into the Perfect Harmony Lodge in Marseille, or one of the military lodges during the Italian campaign. Regardless of formal membership, it is clear that Masonic connections played a significant role in young Bonaparte's career. Among his early patrons were many influential Masons, including Paul Barras, a member of the Directory who promoted Napoleon to important command positions. Masonic networks ensured the loyalty of many officers and officials, which helped Bonaparte in his ascent to power, and especially during the coup d'état of the 18th Brumaire. Masonic ideals of meritocracy, advancement based on merit, not birth, aligned with Napoleon's personal convictions and the policies he pursued. This made him a natural ally of the Masons in the early stages. Masonic lodges played an ambiguous but significant role in the events of the Great French Revolution. Long before the storming of the Bastille in 1789, Masonic gatherings became peculiar laboratories of new ideas. In halls hidden from prying eyes, representatives of different estates, nobles, priests, bourgeoisie, discussed the works of Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu. Here, in an atmosphere of equality and brotherhood, a new vision of society was born. The famous revolutionary slogan, "Liberty, Equality, Fraternity," is strikingly consonant with fundamental Masonic principles. This is no mere coincidence. Many revolutionary leaders belonged to Masonic lodges. Marquis de Lafayette, Duke of Orleans, Mirabeau, Danton, Desmoulins. All of them underwent Masonic initiation. In the National Assembly and the Convention, brothers constituted a noticeable portion of the deputies. However, it would be an oversimplification to consider Freemasonry a unified force directing the revolution. Masonic lodges of that time lacked centralized leadership and a single political program. Among Masons were both radical Jacobins and moderate Girondins, and some brothers even supported the monarchy. The most controversial period is associated with the Jacobin Terror. Maximilien Robespierre, though sharing many Masonic ideals, began to persecute Masonic organizations, seeing them as a threat to his power. Many Masons perished on the guillotine during the Terror of 1793 to 1794. After the Thermidorian reaction, and especially with the Directory's ascent to power, Masonic lodges experienced a revival. It was during this period that the young General Bonaparte began his rise. Masonic networks, encompassing the army, administration, and business, became an important element of the new French elite. Napoleon, observing these processes, perfectly understood the dual nature of Freemasonry. On the one hand, Masonic lodges were guardians of revolutionary ideals and could become a pillar of the new power. On the other hand, their independence, secret nature, and international connections posed a potential threat to an ambitious leader striving for absolute power. Of particular concern were the contacts of French Masons with brothers from other countries, especially from England, France's main geopolitical adversary. In conditions of incessant wars, any cross-border connections could be perceived as a threat to national security. Upon coming to power, Napoleon adopted a pragmatic approach, not to ban Freemasonry, but to place it under state control. In 1804, having become emperor, he initiated the unification of various Masonic organizations under the aegis of the Grand Orient of France, placing his brother Joseph Bonaparte at its head. This was a masterful move. While formally respecting the independence of Masonic lodges, Napoleon effectively turned them into an instrument of his policy. The coup d'état of the 18th of Brumaire, 1799, which brought Napoleon to power as first consul, opened a new chapter in his relationship with Masonic organizations. Bonaparte, always distinguished by strategic thinking, perfectly understood that to build a stable state, it was necessary to control all influential public forces, from the army and the church to secret societies. In the first months of the consulate, Napoleon conducted a thorough assessment of the Masonic movement in France. By that time, there were more than 500 lodges of various orientations operating in the country, from traditional to revolutionary. Many of them maintained independence and contacts with foreign Masonic centers, especially English and Scottish ones. Such disunity posed a potential danger to the new government. Napoleon, relying on the advice of his Minister of Police, Joseph Fouché, who according to some sources was himself a Mason, developed a plan to centralize and subjugate the Masonic movement. In 1800, Napoleon initiated negotiations between various Masonic systems in France. Formally, this was done to overcome the schism in the Masonic community. But the true goal was to create a unified, state-controlled organization. The result was the strengthening of the Grand Orient of France as the country's main Masonic body. A key step in establishing control was the appointment in 1804 of Napoleon's elder brother, Joseph Bonaparte, as Grand Master of the Grand Orient. This decision had profound symbolic and practical meaning. The Masonic hierarchy was now directly linked to the ruling dynasty. Joseph, though an initiated Mason, effectively acted as his brother's envoy. Under his leadership, a reform of Masonic rituals and administrative structure was carried out. All lodges were obliged to register with the Grand Orient, provide membership lists, and activity reports. Disobedient lodges were closed. Government agents were infiltrated into Masonic lodges to monitor sentiments and identify potential opponents of the regime. Fouché created a special police unit to monitor Masonic activities. Interestingly, many police agents themselves became Masons for more effective surveillance. Napoleon encouraged his generals and senior officials to join Masonic lodges. By 1805, almost the entire military and civilian elite of the empire was represented in Masonic organizations. This allowed Bonaparte to use Masonic channels to strengthen loyalty and spread his influence. Special attention was paid to controlling Masonic lodges in the army. Military lodges became a tool for maintaining discipline and loyalty to the emperor. At the same time, they served as a means of spreading French influence in occupied territories. When Napoleon Bonaparte established his empire, Freemasons had already deeply infiltrated the power structures of France. His administration presented a striking paradox. An emperor, increasingly wary of secret societies, found himself surrounded by individuals belonging to the Masonic Brotherhood. Many of his marshals, ministers, and high-ranking officials had been initiated into various lodges. Among Napoleon's inner circle, prominent Freemasons included military leaders such as Joachim Murat, Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, Michel Ney, and André Massena. All of them were members of various lodges and ascended the Masonic hierarchy in parallel with their military careers. Murat, married to Napoleon's sister Caroline, was a member of the Parisian lodge La Parfaite Sincérité. Bernadotte, the future king of Sweden, belonged to the lodge La Parfaite Amitié. In the civil administration, the situation was similar. Joseph Fouché, the all-powerful Minister of Police, used his Masonic connections to establish an extensive spy network. Charles Maurice Talleyrand, Minister of Foreign Affairs and a master of political intrigue, was also an initiated Freemason. Jean-Jacques Régis Cambacérès, the second-in-command of the empire and Napoleon's chief jurist, held a high position in the Masonic hierarchy of the Grand Orient de France. This dual loyalty to the emperor and to the Masonic Brotherhood created a complex dynamic within the government. On one hand, Masonic ties strengthened the solidarity of the elite, facilitated faster resolution of administrative issues, and smoothed over conflicts. On the other hand, they gave rise to suspicions of hidden influences and secret agendas. Napoleon skillfully exploited this situation. He encouraged the establishment of new lodges in the army, viewing them as a tool for strengthening morale and loyalty. Military lodges followed the Grand Army across Europe, becoming centers for the dissemination of French influence in conquered territories. Freemasonry was particularly active in Italy, where dozens of new lodges emerged under French influence. The Napoleonic Code, which abolished many feudal restrictions, found fervent support among Italian Freemasons who shared the ideals of the Enlightenment. In Germany, French military lodges established contact with local Freemasons, creating a network of supporters for Napoleonic reforms. This caused growing concern among German patriots, who viewed Freemasonry as a conduit for French influence. Despite initial support and utilization of Masonic structures, Napoleon's attitude towards secret societies began to shift around 1807. This turn was not sudden. Rather, it was a gradual cooling, caused by a series of factors and events that compelled the emperor to reconsider his policy. The first signal was the growing influence of Masonic lodges in conquered countries. In Germany, Italy, and Spain, local Masons, who had initially welcomed French ideas of liberty and equality, increasingly became centers of national resistance. Napoleon received reports that in some lodges, under the guise of Masonic rituals, plans for uprisings against French domination were being discussed. Of particular concern was the fact that Masonic networks crossed state borders. Masonic brethren from warring countries maintained contacts, exchanged information, and assisted each other. For Napoleon, who had established the continental blockade against England, such connections appeared suspicious and dangerous. A decisive moment was the uncovering in 1808 of General Claude-François Mallet's conspiracy, who, as it turned out, was connected with the secret society of the Philadelphians, an organization that grew out of Masonic lodges but adopted a radical Republican ideology. Although the conspiracy was uncovered, the mere fact that a high-ranking military official was planning a coup d'état deeply shook the emperor. Another factor was the conflict with Pope Pius VII. In 1809, after the annexation of the Papal States, the pontiff excommunicated Napoleon. The Catholic Church traditionally opposed Freemasonry, and now, seeking to improve relations with Catholics, Napoleon began to distance himself from Masonic organizations. During this same period, Police Minister Joseph Fouché, who himself had Masonic connections, fell out of favor. Napoleon suspected him of double-dealing and dismissed him in 1810. The new police minister, Savary, did not have such deep ties with Freemasonry and regarded secret societies with great suspicion. As the empire expanded, Napoleon increasingly moved away from revolutionary ideals towards traditional monarchical rule. He married the Austrian princess Marie-Louise, surrounded himself with court aristocracy, and revived many monarchical rituals. In this new imperial context, Masonic ideals of equality and fraternity appeared increasingly out of place. By 1812, on the eve of the Russian campaign, Napoleon already considered Masonic lodges a potential source of threat. The imperial police intensified surveillance of Masonic meetings. Many lodges were closed under various pretexts, and their leaders came under close scrutiny from the authorities. In the year 1807, when Napoleon's empire reached the zenith of its power, in the shadow of imperial grandeur, a secret society was born that would later become one of the emperor's most dangerous adversaries. The Philadelphians, as the members of this organization, founded by Colonel Jacques-Joseph Ude in eastern France, called themselves. The name alluded to the ancient Greek ideal of brotherly love, but the society's goals were far from fraternal feelings towards the emperor. Ude, a former Jacobin and a staunch Republican, created the organization based on Masonic principles, but with a radical political program. The Philadelphians sought to overthrow Napoleon and restore the Republic. They used a complex system of degrees of initiation and secret signs, borrowed from Masonic rituals, but adapted for conspiratorial activities. The society quickly spread throughout army circles, especially among officers dissatisfied with the transformation of the Republic into an empire. By 1809, the Philadelphians had cells in most military garrisons of France and the territories it controlled. They held particularly strong positions in the Army of the Rhine and among officers stationed in Italy. The most famous conspiracy associated with the Philadelphians was General Claude-François Mallet's attempted coup d'état in 1812. While Napoleon was in Russia, Mallet, who was being held in a mental asylum, managed to escape and announce the emperor's death. He succeeded in mobilizing part of the Parisian garrison and arresting several ministers before the plot was uncovered. Although Mallet was executed and his immediate accomplices arrested, the Philadelphian network remained intact. Napoleon, returning from Russia after the catastrophic defeat, was shocked by how easily the conspirators had managed to seize control of Paris, even if only for a few hours. In addition to the Philadelphians, other secret societies also acted against Napoleon. In Germany, the Tugendbund, League of Virtue, and the Black League united patriots who sought to liberate German lands from French domination. These organizations, although not formally connected with Freemasonry, used similar methods of conspiracy and rituals. In Italy, the Carbonari Society, which had Masonic roots but adopted a more radical nationalist program, was active. The Carbonari, charcoal burners, used the symbolism of the charcoal trade for their rituals and aimed at the unification of Italy and the expulsion of foreign occupiers, including the French. Particular concern was raised by the connections between these various secret societies. Napoleon's police intercepted encrypted messages between the Philadelphians and German patriotic organizations. There was evidence of meetings between representatives of various secret societies in Switzerland, a neutral territory where they could exchange information and coordinate actions. The Imperial counterintelligence reported several assassination attempts on Napoleon organized by these secret societies. Most plots were uncovered at an early stage, but some reached the point of attempted execution. In 1809, in Schönbrunn, a German student named Friedrich Stopps, connected with the Tugendbund, tried to stab the emperor with a dagger during a military parade. As soon as Napoleon recognized the potential threat from Masonic organizations, he immediately set about creating a comprehensive surveillance system. The Ministry of Police, first under Joseph Fouché and then under Jean-Marie René Savary, developed a multi-layered structure to control the activities of lodges throughout the empire. At the heart of this system was a network of informants embedded within Masonic organizations. The police carefully selected agents from ambitious officials, military personnel, and even clergy. These individuals underwent genuine Masonic initiation and spent years climbing the hierarchical ladder of the brotherhood, all while supplying valuable information to the authorities. The strategy of double agents was particularly effective. Some high-ranking Masons, under threat of exposure for anti-government activities, agreed to work for the police, betraying information about their brethren. Historians have found archival evidence that even some leaders of the Grand Orient of France secretly collaborated with Imperial special services. Napoleon personally received weekly reports on the activities of the most influential Masonic lodges. Documents with his marginal notes have been preserved, testifying to how seriously the emperor regarded this information. Particular attention was paid to lodges that included military and government officials. The Imperial police developed a system for classifying Masonic organizations by their degree of loyalty. Lodges deemed safe received tacit permission to continue operating under surveillance. Suspicious lodges were subjected to more intensive control, up to and including covert wiretapping of their meetings. Organizations implicated in anti-government activities were immediately closed and their leaders arrested. In 1810, a special card index of Masons was created, including thousands of names with detailed dossiers. For each significant member of the Brotherhood, a psychological profile was compiled, documenting their connections, political views, and even personal weaknesses that could be exploited for leverage. The system of mail interception was particularly sophisticated. In the main post office of Paris, there was a secret cabinet where specially trained officials opened and copied letters addressed to or sent by prominent Masons. Special methods were used to open letters without visible traces of interference. In the provinces and occupied territories, control was exercised through a network of prefects and police commissioners. They were obliged to regularly report on any Masonic gatherings occurring within their jurisdiction. Disguised gendarmes were often used to attend Masonic events, subsequently compiling detailed reports. By 1810, Napoleon's suspicions had escalated into open repression against Masonic organizations throughout the empire. The first wave of lodge closures began in the German lands, where anti-French sentiment was particularly strong. After the defeat of Prussia, the emperor received intelligence reports indicating that Berlin lodges had become centers of patriotic resistance. A special decree dissolved 23 German Masonic organizations, their property was confiscated, and their archives seized for police examination. Particularly harsh measures were applied to lodges associated with Prussian officers. Baron von Stein, a renowned reformer and Freemason, was declared an enemy of France and forced to flee to Russia to escape arrest. In Königsberg, French authorities conducted a show trial of the leaders of the Three Crowns Lodge, accusing them of treason and espionage for England. Although the death sentences were commuted to long-term imprisonment, the very fact of the persecution of Masons had a strong deterrent effect. In Italy, repression took on a more selective character. Napoleon, who had become King of Italy, could not completely ignore the fact that many of his Italian supporters were Masons. However, lodges showing signs of independence or connections with the Carbonari were immediately closed. In Milan, the police conducted a night raid on the premises of the Royal Joseph Lodge, where documents indicating contacts with English Masons were discovered. 32 lodge members were arrested, and their leader, Professor Luigi Pelli of the University of Milan, died in custody under unexplained circumstances. Masonic organizations in Spain and Portugal, where anti-French resistance was particularly strong, caused particular alarm among imperial authorities. After the capture of Madrid in 1808, the French police conducted a thorough investigation into the activities of Spanish lodges. More than 100 Masons suspected of connections with partisans were arrested. The confiscated archives of the Madrid lodge Star revealed the existence of a secret network of communications between Spanish patriots and British agents. Even in France, where Freemasonry was under the strictest control, arrests and lodge closures began. Organizations in the southern departments, where Republican sentiments were traditionally strong, were particularly affected. 5 lodges in Marseille and Toulon were closed, and their leaders were interrogated with psychological pressure. The police were particularly interested in the connections between French Masons and their brothers in England and Russia. In Paris, repression was more selective. Napoleon did not want to openly conflict with the Grand Orient of France, headed by his protégés. However, independent lodges, especially those working under the Scottish Rite, were persecuted. A notable case was that of the St. Alexander of Scotland Lodge, whose members were accused of conducting political discussions, an activity strictly forbidden for Masonic organizations. The confiscation of Masonic archives and libraries played a special role in the repression. Napoleon's police created a special unit to analyze seized documents, decipher Masonic symbols, and identify secret connections between various lodges. Thousands of Masonic books, manuscripts, and ritual objects were brought to Paris, where specialists from the Ministry of Police worked with them. Many valuable historical documents were lost during this period. Napoleon personally took an interest in the results of these investigations. There is evidence that the emperor was regularly presented with reports on identified Masonic ciphers and secret signs. Special attention was paid to finding evidence of connections between Masons and revolutionary and republican movements. By 1812, on the eve of the Russian campaign, repression had reached its peak. The police received instructions to intensify surveillance of all Masonic organizations and to arrest any suspicious individuals. During this period, even membership in Freemasonry could be a reason for arrest or expulsion from the capital. When Napoleon Bonaparte conquered Europe, establishing his power from Madrid to Warsaw, he did not suspect that the main resistance to his empire would come not only from the regular armies of the enemy, but also from secret societies operating in the shadows. Masonic lodges, initially welcoming the ideals of the French Revolution, gradually transformed into centers of national resistance to the French occupation. In Germany, this confrontation took on a particularly acute character. After Prussia's humiliating defeat in 1806, German Masonic lodges became true incubators of the patriotic movement. In Berlin, Königsberg, and Dresden, under the guise of philosophical discussions and charitable events, Masons discussed plans for liberation from the French yoke. The famous Prussian reformer Baron von Stein, a high-ranking Mason, created a network of secret patriotic societies, including the legendary Tugendbund, League of Virtue, formerly unconnected with Freemasonry, but sharing many of its principles and methods. In the lodges of Königsberg, officers preparing for the reform of the Prussian army gathered. It was here that General Scharnhorst and Colonel Gneisenau, both Masons, developed plans for the reorganization of the armed forces, which subsequently played a decisive role in the War of Liberation. The French secret police reported suspicious activity in these lodges to Napoleon, but the emperor lacked the resources to fully control Masonic organizations in the occupied territories. In Italy, the situation was no less complex. Many Italian Masons initially welcomed Napoleon as a liberator from Austrian domination and a proponent of progressive reforms. However, over time, his harsh policies and exorbitant taxes caused disillusionment. Italian lodges split into pro-French and patriotic factions. From the latter emerged the Carbonari movement, a radical organization that borrowed many rituals from the Masons, but was aimed at fighting against any foreign rule, including French. In Naples, where Napoleon's brother-in-law Joachim Murat ruled, Masonic lodges became centers for preparing a future uprising. Under the guise of studying ancient manuscripts, Neapolitan Masons secretly manufactured weapons and prepared plans for city barricades. When Murat sided with the Allies in 1814, trying to save his throne, he relied precisely on these secret connections. Spain presented a special case. After the invasion of French troops in 1808, the country plunged into a bloody guerrilla war. Spanish Masons, traditionally close to liberal ideas, faced a difficult choice. Many of them supported Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, placed on the Spanish throne, seeing in him a proponent of necessary reforms. Others joined the resistance, considering the French as occupiers. In Cadiz, the last stronghold of Spanish independence, Masonic lodges played a key role in the development of the liberal constitution of 1812, one of the most progressive in Europe at that time. This constitution, though short-lived, became a symbol of resistance to Napoleonic tyranny and influenced subsequent revolutionary movements in Spain and Latin America. Particularly dangerous for Napoleon were the cross-border connections between Masonic lodges of different countries. Despite the war and blockade, brothers found ways to maintain contacts through neutral territories: Switzerland, Sweden, the Ottoman Empire. British Masons secretly funded anti-Napoleonic movements in continental Europe, transferring funds through a complex network of intermediaries and encrypted messages. When in June 1812, Napoleon's Grand Army crossed the Neman, initiating the invasion of Russia, the emperor was confident of a swift victory. But what followed became a true catastrophe, giving rise to many questions. Among them, the enigmatic role of Masonic organizations in this campaign. Early 19th century Russia presented fertile ground for the spread of Freemasonry. Under Alexander I, who himself sympathized with mystical teachings, Masonic lodges received tacit patronage. Dozens of lodges operated in St. Petersburg and Moscow, uniting representatives of the aristocracy, officers, and intelligentsia. Many key figures of Russian society at that time were Masons. Mikhail Speransky, the chief reformer of the Alexandrian era, belonged to the St. Petersburg Lodge Polar Star. Nikolai Novosiltsev, a close friend and advisor to the emperor, was a Mason of high degree of initiation. In the army, prominent military leaders such as Mikhail Barclay de Tolly and Pyotr Bagration were Masons. When the war began, these connections acquired special significance. According to some accounts, Masonic contacts were used for secret diplomacy between the warring parties. It is known that General Alexander Balashov, sent with a personal message from Alexander to Napoleon after the invasion began, was a Mason and used special signs when meeting with French officer Masons. Even more intriguing is the possible influence of Masonic ties on strategic decisions. The famous retreat of the Russian army, which lured Napoleon deep into the country, is linked by some historians to a Masonic strategy. Barclay de Tolly, the initiator of this plan, acted against public opinion and court pressure, but received secret support from influential brothers in the Tsar's entourage. On the French side, the situation was no less complex. Despite Napoleon's growing distrust of Masons, many of his marshals and generals remained members of the Brotherhood. This created a duality of loyalties, especially at critical moments of the campaign. Some decisions of the French command, seemingly illogical from a military point of view, find explanation if one considers the possible influence of Masonic ties. Particularly illustrative is the case of Marshal Michel Ney, who during the retreat from Russia repeatedly made decisions that saved individual parts of the army at the cost of strategic losses. Ney, a well-known Mason, possibly acted not only as a military leader, but also as a brother, feeling responsible for the lives of his subordinate Masons. The relationships between Napoleon Bonaparte, the Vatican, and Masonic lodges represented a complex tangle of religious, political, and ideological contradictions. While Freemasonry proclaimed religious tolerance and freedom of conscience, the Catholic Church traditionally opposed secret societies, viewing them as a threat to its spiritual authority. Napoleon, balancing between these forces, sought to use both the Church and Freemasonry to strengthen his power, but ultimately leaned towards an alliance with the Vatican against Masonic lodges. The Concordat of 1801 marked a turning point in Napoleon's relations with the Catholic Church. After a decade of revolutionary persecution of religion, the emperor restored Catholicism's official status in France. This step had not only religious, but also political significance. Bonaparte sought to secure the support of conservative segments of the population and legitimize his power through the blessing of the Church. However, relations with Pope Pius VII remained strained. The pontiff, who initially welcomed Napoleon's religious policy, became increasingly concerned about his growing imperial ambitions. The Vatican was particularly alarmed by the patronage the emperor extended to Masonic lodges during the early years of his reign. The Catholic Church had a long tradition of condemning Freemasonry. As early as 1738, Pope Clement XII issued the bull In Eminenti, prohibiting Catholics from joining Masonic lodges under penalty of excommunication. Pius VII shared this position, considering Freemasonry a hotbed of dangerous Enlightenment ideas that undermined the foundations of Christian faith and monarchical order. In his private conversations with Napoleon, the Pope repeatedly expressed concern about the spread of Freemasonry in Catholic countries under French influence. These conversations gradually influenced the emperor's worldview, especially after his coronation in 1804, when he began to position himself as the successor of Charlemagne and a defender of Christianity. The conflict between Napoleon and Pius VII reached its climax in 1809, when French troops occupied the Papal States, and the pontiff himself was arrested and brought to France. This dramatic step caused a wave of indignation among Catholics across Europe. Many Masonic lodges, especially in Italy and Spain, sided with the Pope, despite the traditional antagonism between the Church and Freemasonry. This came as an unpleasant surprise to Napoleon, who had expected the Masons to support him in his struggle against papal power. Paradoxically, the Pope's arrest marked a turning point in Napoleon's attitude towards Freemasonry. The emperor, facing growing resistance in Catholic countries, began to revise his religious policy. He realized that for the stability of the empire, the support of the Church was more important than the loyalty of Masonic lodges. By 1811, Napoleon took steps towards reconciliation with Pius VII, while simultaneously increasing pressure on Masonic organizations. During this period, the police received instructions to more closely monitor the activities of the lodges, especially those that showed sympathy for the Pope or criticized the emperor's religious policy. The year 1813 became a turning point in the destiny of Napoleon's empire. After the catastrophe in Russia, Europe felt that the colossus with feet of clay could be overthrown. In this critical period, Masonic organizations played an unexpectedly important role in forming the anti-Napoleonic coalition and preparing for the emperor's ultimate downfall. In Prussia, General York von Wartenberg, a well-known Mason, without his king's order, concluded the Convention of Tauroggen with the Russians, effectively withdrawing Prussian troops from the war on France's side. Many historians link this decision, made against military subordination, to his Masonic beliefs and secret contacts with Russian brothers. Soon after, the Prussian King Friedrich Wilhelm III, himself a member of a Masonic lodge, declared war on Napoleon. In Austria, Prince Metternich, serving as foreign minister, used Masonic channels for secret negotiations with Russia and Prussia. Although Metternich himself was not officially a Mason, he maintained close contacts with influential members of Viennese lodges and skillfully used these connections in diplomatic maneuvering. Austria, tied to Napoleon by a dynastic marriage, long maintained neutrality, but in August 1813, it finally joined the anti-French coalition. During the Battle of the Nations near Leipzig in October 1813, a significant event occurred. Saxon troops, fighting on Napoleon's side, suddenly switched to the Allies in the midst of the battle. This betrayal, which became one of the reasons for the French defeat, some researchers link to the activities of the secret society Tugendbund, which had close ties to Freemasonry. When the Allied armies entered French territory in early 1814, many French Masons faced an agonizing choice between loyalty to the emperor and the Masonic ideals of peace and philanthropy. The Grand Orient of France, while officially maintaining loyalty to Napoleon, secretly established contacts with lodges in Allied countries. Through these channels, signals were conveyed about the readiness of the French elite to accept the Bourbon Restoration, provided that the main achievements of the Revolution were preserved. Talleyrand, one of the high-ranking Masons in Napoleon's entourage, played a double game, preparing the ground for a change of power. It was in his mansion in Paris that the Russian Emperor Alexander I stayed after the capture of the French capital. Talleyrand used his Masonic connections to secure support for the new government from the French bureaucracy and army. The events of the 100 Days in the spring of 1815, when Napoleon escaped from the island of Elba and briefly regained power, also had a Masonic undertone. Many officers who sided with the returned emperor were bound by Masonic oaths. However, the top leaders of the Grand Orient of France remained loyal to Louis XVIII, fearing that Napoleon's new rule would lead to even harsher repression against their organization. Napoleon's final defeat at Waterloo has its own Masonic mysteries. Marshal Grouchy, whose delay many consider the cause of the French army's rout, was a high-ranking Mason. There is a theory that his actions were dictated not by military logic, but by secret obligations to the Masonic Brotherhood, which sought to end the bloody European wars. After the empire's ultimate fall, Masonic lodges played an important role in preserving the Napoleonic myth. Many veterans of the Grand Army who joined Masonic organizations contributed to the formation of the legend of Napoleon as a misunderstood genius and a bearer of revolutionary ideals. This romanticized version of the emperor's story, spread through Masonic channels, largely shaped his image in 19th-century European culture. St. Helena, an island lost in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, became the last refuge for a man who once ruled half of Europe. Here, in the modest Longwood house, far from the din of battles and court intrigues, Napoleon Bonaparte spent long days reflecting on his extraordinary destiny. Among the many topics that occupied the exile's mind was the enigmatic role of Masonic organizations in his rise and fall. According to those close to him, In the last years of his life, the emperor often returned to the subject of secret societies. Count Las Casas, one of Napoleon's few loyal companions in exile, recorded many of his statements about the Masons. In his Memorial of St. Helena, he cites a characteristic reflection of the emperor. Secret societies could benefit the state if they were under its control. But when they operate in the shadows, they become a dangerous weapon in the hands of the enemies of order. Particularly interesting are the memoirs of General Bertrand, who recorded conversations with the former emperor during evening strolls through Longwood's sparse gardens. According to his notes, Napoleon admitted that he had underestimated the influence of Masonic lodges in Germany and Russia. "I thought I controlled them through my brothers and marshals, but they created an invisible network of resistance. While I was winning battles on the fields, they were defeating me in a secret war." In the last months of his life, as illness increasingly undermined Napoleon's strength, his attitude towards Freemasonry became more conciliatory. According to Dr. Antomarchi, the emperor had an epiphany. "Perhaps I was too harsh on them. They aspired to the same ideals of freedom and brotherhood as I did in my youth. But power changes a man. It makes him fear any force that cannot be fully controlled." Among Napoleon's papers, preserved by his secretary, an unfinished draft of reflections on Freemasonry was found, dated November 1820, just a few months before his death. In it, the former emperor wrote, "History will judge who was right in our confrontation. Perhaps the Masons were the guardians of those very ideals for which I once fought, but which I lost sight of, blinded by the brilliance of the crown." One of the most touching episodes occurred shortly before Napoleon's death. An English officer, sent to strengthen security, turned out to be a Mason. Upon learning this, the dying emperor requested a private meeting with him. What happened behind closed doors remained a secret, but after this conversation, Napoleon seemed more at peace, as if he had closed an important chapter of his life. In his will, Napoleon did not mention Freemasonry directly, but left an enigmatic phrase: "I depart from a world where active force yields to invisible force." Many researchers see in these words an acknowledgement of the significant role that secret societies played in shaping the destiny of the emperor and all of Europe in his time. Napoleon's confrontation with Masonic organizations left a deep mark on the history of France and all of Europe. When, in 1821, on the distant island of St. Helena, the life of the former emperor faded, not only his personal drama, but also an entire era in the relations between state power and secret societies came to an end. The legacy of this confrontation proved multifaceted and contradictory, determining for decades to come the development of both Freemasonry and European political systems. After the fall of Napoleon's empire, Masonic lodges experienced a true revival across Europe. In France, during the Bourbon Restoration, Freemasonry became a refuge for the liberal opposition and a guardian of revolutionary ideals. Many veterans of the Napoleonic Wars, deprived of social standing and prospects under the new regime, found in Masonic lodges fraternal support and an opportunity to remain loyal to the ideas of their youth. It was in these circles that a romanticized image of Napoleon began to form as a defender of revolutionary values and an opponent of reaction. Paradoxically, the emperor, who persecuted Masons in the last years of his reign, was elevated by them almost to the rank of a saint after his death. In Germany and Italy, Masonic organizations played a key role in the development of national liberation and unification movements. The experience of resisting Napoleonic occupation taught Masons to effectively use their secret networks for political activity. The Carbonari in Italy, emerging from Masonic lodges, became the main force in the struggle for the unification of the country. In Germany, Masons actively participated in the liberal movement, which ultimately led to the Revolution of 1848. Napoleon's confrontation with Freemasonry also gave rise to numerous conspiracy theories that persist to this day. In conservative and clerical circles of the 19th century, the belief became widespread that the French Revolution and the subsequent European upheavals were the result of a Masonic conspiracy. Napoleon's figure in these theories was interpreted in two ways. Some saw him as a victim of Masonic intrigues, others as their secret agent. These views gained particular popularity after the revolutions of 1830 and 1848, when Masons indeed played a significant role in the liberal movement. Abbé Baruel, one of the first theorists of the Masonic conspiracy, used the history of Napoleon's relations with Freemasonry as proof of his ideas about the secret influence of lodges on European politics. His works, though based on dubious sources, laid the foundation for many subsequent conspiracy theories. In literature and art, the theme of Napoleon's confrontation with secret societies became a popular subject. From the novels of Alexandre Dumas to modern thrillers, the images of the Emperor and Masons continue to captivate the public imagination, blending historical reality with fiction. In serious historical scholarship, the attitude towards this topic long remained restrained. 19th-century historians, working in an era when Freemasonry remained an influential force, avoided delving into this delicate area. It was only in the second half of the 20th century, with the opening of many archives and the weakening of ideological barriers, that a more objective study of Napoleon's relations with Masonic organizations became possible. Modern research shows that in this confrontation, there were no clear winners or losers. Napoleon, with all his military and political genius, could not fully subordinate or destroy the Masonic movement. At the same time, Masonic lodges, despite their extensive network and influence, could not seriously resist the might of the Napoleonic state during its heyday. The true significance of this confrontation lay in the fact that it defined the model of relations between state power and secret societies in the modern era. Napoleon was the first in history to create an effective system of state control over non-governmental organizations, including Masonic lodges. This model was subsequently used by many European governments, from liberal to authoritarian.